I'm willing to bet that there's not a single one of you that doesn't want big, round delts. It's often referred to as something that's virtually impossible to achieve as a natural lifter. Being that the shoulder muscles have a huge amount of androgen receptors, people who take steroids often have huge shoulders as well. But that doesn't mean that as a natural, you can never create some juicy shoulders. People just often have the wrong idea on how to tackle shoulder training, which leads them to even further speculate that it's impossible to do so. So I'm here to go over why and how it's definitely possible to get big, round, 3D delts as a natural lifter. Right, so to start off, let's divide the deltoid into 3 separate muscles that it's consistent of. Right, so the deltoid is composed out of the anterior head, the lateral head, and the posterior head. All of these 3 muscles have different functions, which are crucial to know for training them in the right manner. The main function of the anterior or front head of the deltoid is shoulder flexion, or bringing your arm up and to the front of your body. The main function of the lateral or side head of the deltoid is shoulder abduction, or bringing your arm up to the side of your body. And the main function of the posterior or rear head of the deltoid is shoulder extension, or bringing your arm behind your body, but is most often trained while utilizing transverse extension, which is moving the arm sideways away from the body with the elbows facing out. Now keep in mind, these are the main functions of the muscles. There are some secondary functions, but I chose to not mention these since they are not of that much importance when trying to hit them in the way of increasing muscle size and strength. Alright, so now that we have the main functions of these muscles covered, we can dive into the correct ways to train these muscles. The deltoids are often trained wrong in the way of either training them too much or in the wrong manner or volume. People often tend to overshoot in volume on the front delts when aiming to increase their delt size. The fact of the matter is that the anterior head gets so much work from the bench press and all of the other pressing movements on its own, so often it's really unnecessary to increase the volume on the anterior head. It's often more so the fact of having lagging posterior delts or lateral delts, since these particular muscles get overlooked so quickly, even though they make up for an insane amount of delt size when they are well developed. Right, so let's start off with the anterior deltoid. There are numerous amounts of exercises you can perform to target the anterior or front head of the deltoid. You have dumbbell shoulder presses, Arnold presses, machine presses, you name it. Now the exercise that I'm personally a big fan of, however, is the barbell overhead press. Since every single muscle in your body requires a bigger stimulus over time through progressive overload, it's more efficient to pick an exercise that you can easily apply that to. The overhead press is very suitable for adding small increments of weight over time, which will result in a bigger stimulus and thus growth of the muscle. Now, since the overhead press is a compound movement, it won't just isolate the front deltoid, but also tackle on a bit of the lateral and the posterior deltoid. And even a bit of the upper back will come to play for stabilization. Now here are some tips for this exercise so that you can perform it comfortably, safely and effectively. Grip the bar just outside of shoulder width, or find out what works best for you personally. Keep your elbows underneath the bar in a vertical line with your torso, so don't stick your elbows out in front of your body to generate the most amount of force. Squeeze your glutes for the entire duration of the exercise for core stability. You'll notice that when you don't squeeze your glutes, you will have the tendency to lose balance. Stick your head through the bar as you press it up. This makes it so that you fully use your deltoid muscles while enabling you to press in a straight line with your body to prevent biomechanical strength loss. And in the negative motion of the rep, let the bar travel to and rest on the upper part of your chest. Now, like I said, the front delts get activated in virtually all pressing motions. So in my opinion, doing an overhead press is more than enough front delt stimulation. Now, if by any case your front delts are a severe lagging body part, I'd advise you to do an extra movement like Arnold presses, shoulder presses or a shoulder press machine. And then we have the muscle that might contribute the most to one's aesthetic value, and that is the lateral deltoid. Now, since this muscle is most activated in an abducted position, it's important to implement movements that include abduction. And the best exercise to achieve this with is the side lateral raise. Now this might seem simple, but there are several ways to do this exercise that will increase the activation of the lateral head compared to performing the exercise quote unquote normally. Now the normal way of doing a lateral raise is by lifting the weight straight to the side with your palms to your side. However, by performing a side lateral raise while pointing your pinky fingers up, you will put the lateral deltoid in a more biomechanical advantaged position to contract and thus be more isolated. Now this means that you are pronating the wrist or internally rotating your arm up to the point that your pinky finger is pointed upwards. Now in contrary to it being a good way to isolate the side delt, it can possibly cause shoulder impingement for some people. So if you'd like to try this out, always keep your scapula retracted to minimize the risk. Now I'd say simply try it out and see if it feels comfortable for you. If it does, stick to it, and if it doesn't, simply perform the side raises with your palms to your side. Now since the rotator cuff muscles are active for approximately the first 25 degrees of any side raise, it can cause your rotator cuff muscles to fatigue before your side delt actually does. Now to counter this, you can perform leaning away side raises with either a cable or a dumbbell. This takes the rotator cuff activation out of the equation and lets you simply focus on training the side delts. Now when performing a side lateral raise, it's important to not lift the weight above 90 degrees across your body. By going over 90 degrees, the activation of the traps come into play, and this is something you might want to avoid since it takes away from the activation of the lateral head of the deltoid. I personally like to switch between performing the side lateral raise in a cable station, since this delivers a more constant tension on the muscle, and performing them with dumbbells. Try to switch between doing them somewhat heavy and light to keep progressive overload intact, but also being able to correctly stimulate the muscles that are aimed to be trained. Now as an extra exercise that can be really good for packing on some extra volume on the lateral delts is the upright row. Now, this exercise gets a lot of bad credit since it can cause shoulder impingement for a lot of people. Even though if it's performed correctly, not only can this be prevented, but it's also an exercise that you can greatly grow your side delts with. You often hear people claiming to simply perform the exercise like the way it's named, rowing it straight up. Now this is what actually causes these shoulder issues, since you're not putting your shoulder blades in a favorable position to actually stimulate the side delts. Now to perform this exercise correctly, focus on putting the weight up and back, kind of as if you're rowing it in an arch. So you're virtually pulling the weight more towards your face instead of towards your eyesight in front of you. Grip the bar outside of shoulder width and pull the elbows up and back to get the most side delt stimulation out of this exercise. Now if the bar is still something that's not treating your shoulders really well, then try performing it with dumbbells, since that allows for a more free range of motion. Now on some of my upper body workouts I like to superset a side lateral raise with a dumbbell or barbell upright row, since you can still get a lot of side delt stimulation from the upright rows after you're fatigued from the side lateral raises. So if you'd like to, I highly recommend you to try that superset out on one of your push or upper body workouts. And then comes the most underlooked muscle that can contribute a lot to the complete 3D look of your shoulders, which is the posterior deltoid. Now like I said, this is the most forgotten deltoid muscle, since like I covered earlier, people tend to focus too much on anterior deltoid development, even though this is the muscle that makes your delts look more full and developed. Training this muscle is not only good for creating aesthetic shoulders, it's also extremely important for postural benefits and keeping your shoulders healthy. By focusing too much on pressing motions and neglecting your rear delts, you will develop a forward rounded posture, and that will mess you up big time in the long run, so train those rear delts for your own good. Now, there are two exercises that I want to shine a light on, and those are the face pulls and the rear delt fly. The face pull is a really well-known rear deltoid exercise, since it does not only train the rear delts, but also allows you to train external rotation of the shoulder, which is very important for keeping your shoulders mobile and healthy, while also strengthening the rotator cuff muscles. You can perform this exercise with an overhand grip or an underhand grip, so I'd advise you to simply try out what feels most comfortable for you and stick to that grip. And when performing a face pull, try to emulate doing a back double biceps pose to create a full range of motion. Keep a squeeze at the top of the movement and slowly control the weight on the eccentric part of the movement. This is an exercise you don't really have to go heavy on, since it's meant to isolate the rear deltoid and the rotator cuff muscles. Focus more on contraction instead of explosiveness. The last exercise is the rear delt fly. Now when performing this exercise, try to focus on the exact opposite of what you would do with a chest fly. Focus on protracting your shoulder blades and keep them protracted as you go through the movement. This puts the rear delt in a more biomechanical favored position to contract and stretch, thus keeping the tension there instead of letting the back muscles take over the movement. Alright, so these are all the exercises that I think are the most important for creating bigger, healthier and juicier shoulders. Now when it comes to volume, there are differences when it comes to each head of the deltoid. For the side and rear deltoid, going anywhere below 8 reps probably isn't a smart idea, since it doesn't really respond quite well to that due to their fiber type being slightly slow twitch dominant, despite it being about a 50-50 split between fast and slow twitch. So keeping it in a moderate to high, around 8 to 20 rep range would be the sweet spot. Now for sets, I'd recommend around 3 to 5 sets per workout, 2 to 3 times per week. Now as already mentioned, the anterior delts get a lot of stimulation from all pressing motions, including the bench press, dumbbell press and so forth. So if it's your goal to train them by itself, focus on performing a compound movement such as the overhead press 1 time per week. Since it gets enough volume already, I'd recommend focusing more on the strength aspect of the OHP, performing it in the 3 to 8 rep range. Now if you still tend to have lagging front delts, throw in an exercise such as the dumbbell shoulder press or an Arnold press. Now of course genetics and bone structure can come into play when it comes to really developing the broad shoulder look, but that doesn't mean that you can build quality muscle mass to make your delts grow in the first place. So by utilizing the information I've covered in this video, with time and patience, you can create a sick set of 3D delts. Alright, what's going on guys? Thank you all so much for watching the video. If you enjoyed it and thought it was informative and helpful, then please consider hitting the like button because it really helps out the channel grow. Comment down below and subscribe to the channel for so much more content coming really soon. I'm out guys, and peace out. See you in the next one.